This episode of the Managing Madrid Podcast is brought to you by the Managing Madrid Podcast live in Toronto. We're playing pickup footy on December 6th, raising money for sick kids in Toronto, giving away prizes, and chatting Real Madrid with passionate Madridistas. If you want to come kick it with us, play some footy, all for a good cause, then come out. If you're anywhere near Toronto, Hamilton, Niagara, if you're in Ottawa, Montreal, heck, Moncton, Halifax, Vancouver, Buffalo, Detroit, Cleveland, New York, Philly, drive in, fly in, do whatever you have to do. We look forward to seeing your skills and helping sick kids in Toronto. If you want to RSVP to the event, the link is in the show notes. We'd love to see you there. I'll be there. That's Kiyan Sobhani, by the way. Mehdi Hassan will be there. We got Peña Madridista Toronto. We got TAC Academy. And much more, many more. Really fun night in the works. December 6th. Come out if you're in Toronto.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First great podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Welcome, everyone, to the Managing Madrid Podcast. This is your host, Kiyan Sobhani. Today, I'm joined by my co-host and great friend, Matt Wiltse. We're recording this on November 4th, so a day before AC Milan comes to town. And earlier this morning, we had Ancelotti and Vasquez speak to the media, mostly about the situation in Valencia. All of our hearts are out to them. And Lucas Navarrete, who is in Valencia. And it was the correct decision not to play that game and a few others. And given that we had no podcast to do this weekend because there was no game, Matt and I thought we would open up the big picture segment that we usually do for members up for free so you guys can get a taste of it and know kind of what we do for members every week. So once a week, Matt and I, and sometimes Matt and Ruben, have this segment called The Big Picture. And we talk about big picture stuff and talk about maybe Real Madrid season as a whole, things we find interesting, deep dives on our previous games where we rewatch it or we look at some new data. So we're going to do that and some more today. Matt, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Kiyan. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm good, and I'm excited to chat with you. I think today's episode will be focused more on some data and new data that we haven't looked at yet, particularly in reference to the Clasico, but I think it'll lead us into bigger picture and broader discussions. And I know I rewatched the Clasico second half. I know you have rewatched some of Celta and some of the Clasico and some other films. So I think we come into this pod with some new ideas, some new takes. So I don't think it will be a rehash of what listeners have already heard. And yeah, I mean, you want to get right into it? I've got some stats lined up for you here.
Let's do it. Let's do it. What was eye-opening to you?
Yeah, so I've kind of got separate. There's multiple different breakouts here. So maybe we start with some of the defensive numbers. So recoveries and our pressing numbers in the first half and the second half, both for Madrid and Barca. So recoveries per minute in the first half were 0.32. In the second half, were 0.23. That was a 30% drop from Real Madrid in the second half. So recoveries per minute, 30% drop. Then our pressing numbers, same exact thing. You see a huge drop off from first half to second half. So our passes per defensive action, Madrid in the first half, 11.2. In the second half, 6.6. Barcelona 8.0 in the first half, second half 10.3. So again, you see a huge drop off come. And so I rewatched that second half, and my biggest takeaway was I don't understand why Ancelotti has continued to press or continued to insist on the press. We've said it countless times. I've said it countless times. this Real Madrid has never been a good pressing team. Like when over how the last 20, 30 years you've been watching this team, Kiyan, when have we ever been a consistently good pressing team?
Almost never. I think
Never. Yeah.
16, 17, we probably did it
Moments.
the best
Yeah, we
in
had moments.
moments. And we had the ability to suffocate opponents with a lot of good counter pressing too. And, you think back to the 16, 17 season where you had two elite fullbacks in Marcelo and Carvajal pushing high up the pitch. And you had Cristiano and Bale just flooding the box and getting on the end of crosses. And then the rebounds would fall to Cruz, Modric, Casemiro flying in. That was probably like the best I can remember in terms of being able to suffocate opponents like that high up the pitch.
Agreed. And so again, that's over a 30-year, whatever year sample size. Like that's all we have. And so um, what I've noticed from the season is like, yes, we all agree, hey, we have these certain players to play with this characteristics, but I'm not so sure I agree, especially given the balance and makeup of the squad. And just watching that second half, it's so disjointed. It's so like every single goal came from poor pressing. Every single one. It came from most of them came from like a restart. So a set piece, a throw in, a goal kick, something like that, where we switch off and then one person tries to press and the rest of the team doesn't follow. And then it just all falls apart. And like you rewind and watch that first goal, it's comical what Mbappe does defensively. Like he's following Casado, and then he literally just stops. He stops tracking him, and Casado can pick his head up, has all the time in the world. Tchouaméni and Valverde don't have time to get out to him, and he plays that through ball to Lewandowski. So my point in saying all this, and then you look at the numbers, and it's clear, hey, maybe we pressed decently well in the first half, but we came off dramatically in the second half. So a lot of those rumors we've been hearing about the physical levels, well, and even I think a Barcelona player said it after the match that Madrid, we saw Madrid look tired. I think it was just Lamine Yamal. We saw Madrid look tired, and so we knew we could go get after them even more in the second half. And if that's like all that being the case, like knowing what we know about this team, knowing about the physical levels, knowing we've never been a great pressing team and Ancelotti never a great pressing coach, why are we insisting on it? Like it was our absolute downfall in that game, and it didn't need to be. Like this was the perfect game to just sit back, absorb, and counter. So yeah, I initially, I think in our post-match podcast, I initially was very hard on the players and not so much on Ancelotti. But rewatching this, I have a lot of frustrations with the way Ancelotti has just persisted with this press, because it's not just this game; it's been all season.
I think the second half is where Ancelotti made his mistakes in that game. Whereas in the first half, there seemed to be, I mean, I thought the first half generally was fine, apart from the strikers not holding their runs and not being smart about how to beat that offside trap. And also the finishing was poor the couple times we did actually break the offside trap. But you remember 2022 when all of a sudden we just stopped pressing against of all teams to stop it was Shakhtar Donetsk, remember?
Yep. Yeah.
And we won 5-0. And my dream is to just wake up tomorrow and we're like just this counter-attacking low block. And before people complain and are like, this is Real Madrid, how can you have that standard for Real Madrid? We need to be attacking, we need to be doing all this pressing, and like this is not a realistic. What you're asking for is not realistic. It's not realistic for us to have an efficient press. So why force it, like you said? Ultimately, I think that we will fall back on that because it is what gives us, like every team is different. Every team has strengths and weaknesses. For this particular team, how it's set up, especially with two attackers who don't defend, in particular one attacker who really doesn't defend, which is Mbappe. Because Vinicius actually does work hard off the ball. Yeah. You need to come up with some kind of solution. And that is, to me, bring it into a low compact block. And if Mbappe is just going to be roaming off the ball anyway, just have him as an outlet in transition. I think that's one solution that I think the team will fall back on. But you and I were on the same page too after Clasico that like at halftime, I think our tweets were similar in that the concern was like if you had a good first half like that and you didn't score, the second half is like almost doomed because you've expended all that energy without capitalizing, and now Barcelona know how to adjust, and that's what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
This whole tired thing to me was weird too because it was like a combination of fatigue, but also just bad decisions all
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Um, and Flick was saying after the game that in the second half we wanted to press more and have more control, and that's how easy it was. Like that was the shift. The other thing I'm curious to get your thoughts on is like I think we all love Luka Modric. I think it was the game prior, was it? Or maybe two games prior to that, his pass against Celta. Was it Celta? The
Yeah.
through ball to
Yep.
Vinny. So he has these moments and he's still brilliant. But I also noticed that like I feel like there is this feeling that he has to play every game. When he came in the Clasico, I thought our defense just started falling apart in midfield. Like one of the things, like when he comes on and then Olmo comes on, immediately you saw Olmo just looking around, like, "Oh, no one's marking me in midfield. I can just do whatever the hell I want between the lines. I get the ball." And they how many times did they nearly score from that one action of just getting the ball, bypassing the midfield, and getting it to Olmo? And I think there's a few realizations that Carlo has to come to. One is feel free to chime in on any of this, all of this, anything. But
Yeah, real quick, just on
yeah, go
Olmo,
ahead.
because yeah, that was honestly rewatching that second half. Dani Olmo destroyed us. I thought he
Yeah,
was probably one of the best players on Bar. Like he didn't get any credit after the game, but
yeah.
he was incredible. He came on and just he was like you said, so good between our lines. He constantly baited Militao out of shape. So Militao would step out and then he would just do a little one-touch dink around him and play right through the gap. And yeah, he and again it came down to our terrible press. Like we didn't need Militao to step out to him if we were kind of sitting in a low block and we suffocated that space. Like and we had a solid block of 8 defending deeper. But because we were trying to press and because we had so much space between our lines and he could sit there, like it was a dream for him. And he was absolutely devastating. Like I don't think a lot of people picked up on that, but when you rewatch it, you're like, oh my God, Olmo killed us after he came on.
Olmo killed us. I also and I don't. Part of me feels weird also like pinpointing blame on like one single person in any of this. I think it was a bit of like Militao and Rudiger stepping up at the wrong times, even Vasquez and Mendy stepping up at the wrong times, or being loose in possession under pressure, or Lunen's distribution in that game, or Mbappe not timing his offside runs. Like there's so much to go around. Carlo's decisions. So, but I also think with Modric over the years, you see the team's defense in midfield and what it means. Like I remember being at Stamford Bridge in 2023, I guess it was, when Chelsea was cooking us with like this weird Conte false 9 role, which Lampard implemented. And it was Modric on that left side. And Carlo, after the game, was like, we had to switch Modric and Fede to improve defensively on that left side. And peak Modric actually held the team together defensively, but I just don't think he has the legs to do that anymore. That's one thing I'd say. And the other thing is, I think with this new reality that Mbappe is at Real Madrid, the solution is not going to be to bench him because that's not a realistic solution to bench a big name superstar like that. You can't do that at Real Madrid. So you have to make it work. And one of the things that I kind of come to the conclusion of in these past few games watching him is that like, in France, when he was playing at an unstoppable level, one of the things he had was like Giroud in the box, or like Benzema in that brief period where it looked amazing with Benzema and Mbappe and that French national team before Benzema got exiled again. Is it worth putting Bellingham in last year's advanced position as opposed to having him like play behind Lucas Vasquez in Clasico?
I think it's even because I mean Bellingham plays. I feel like there were 3 phases to Bellingham's year last year. First was the diamond, then he moved to kind of left midfield, and then he had games where he was false 9 striker, like the Girona game. And I
Yeah.
think it's that Girona role that you're talking about now, because I think he's going to have to start to play like a Giroud and play like a target man almost. Like he's going to start almost as if a striker. And so, yeah, I think I wouldn't be opposed to that. Would you have Mbappe on the right?
Either have him on the right in a more symmetrical kind of attacking formation, or if he's going to be more in the middle or left side, at least have someone in the box to get defenders to be dragged away a little bit. Because right now our penetrations in the box are very predictable, and anytime a cross does come in, like there's 0% confidence of
Well,
a
I
goal.
also, the other benefit to him playing that, there's two other benefits to him playing that role, particularly if we stop pressing. One is, like, I don't think Mbappe is great with holding off defenders and just holding up play, like being a target man and then feeding others.
No.
I think Jude would be much, much better at that. And two, part of the reason why Casado and Frankie de Jong and Pedri looked like some of the best players in the world in that Barcelona game was because Mbappe and Vinicius, particularly Mbappe, like we always talk about, were defending them, quote in quotations, defending.
Right.
And so, so if you get someone like Bellingham who's now pressing the defensive mid, or at least kind of cover shadowing and marking the defensive mid, then that's a different story than Mbappe there. So yeah, I'm at this point I'm open to that for sure.
I think what tends to happen with Bellingham is because he's so good at so many different things, he gets punished for that tactically.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's holding the team's defense together a lot by himself too. And
He's too good to be punished tactically too. Like
right.
it's not fair to him.
But I also think like a few things happen when you asking him just to basically do everything. One is that you lose his effectiveness at the end of the season. Like I think he just burns out.
Yeah.
Then you're also losing attacking input. I think, and we have Camavinga back now when Fede Valverde is one of the best two-way midfielders in the world. So you have some security there to take on more defensive roles that if Bellingham goes in that attacking position. Also, Bellingham in attack plays defense quite a bit too anyway.
Yeah.
Like very similar to Benzema in that
Yeah.
Benzema was very good at making sure the team is organized behind the ball, getting in the box when he needs to, doing the link-up play when he needs to. Bellingham has that understanding of the game as well. And that's why I thought of it. And honestly, at this point, I think it's pretty clear that we need to think of something differently.
Yeah. It would definitely lighten his load too. Like I think to your point, getting him to the end of the season where he isn't burnt out, I think it would that type of position for him would definitely lighten his load.
Yeah.
I want to get into kind of some of the next stats here I had prepped for you. So next on the list, we set pieces, corner kicks and free kicks. We had 3 times the amount of corners and free kicks as Barcelona. We need a specialist out on the field. Lucas and Valverde were our set piece takers in that game. We had 0 of our corners or free kicks end in a shot. We had a combined 14 opportunities from those set pieces. 0 ended in a shot. On the other hand, Barca only had 4 set piece opportunities altogether from the game, and half of them ended up in shots. So you need a Modric, a Rodrigo, or an Arda Güler in the game at all points at some point, or Alaba when he's back. Like you need specialists. They're too valuable and they can change games that I don't think we can get away with not having those types of players on the field, because at the end of the day, like you heard me say, restarts is where, and set pieces is where Barcelona scored. Like even little things as throw-ins is when teams switch off. And if you don't have specialists in that regard and you're not focusing on that stuff, then it does come back to bite you. And we had 14 chances. Like that's huge to take advantage of that type of stuff, and we didn't at all.
I kind of like when we go, if we don't have a specialist, free kick specialist. I mean, you could argue Fede can hit them directly at least. But in terms of getting the ball into the box, if we don't have a specialist, we seem to create more dangerous opportunities by playing it short and working it around. Um, but yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, this is very unusual at Real Madrid. We don't have that guy, for literally 2 decades straight. I mean, we went from like Figo, Roberto Carlos, Zidane,
Beckham,
Beckham,
yeah,
to then
insane.
transition to Cristiano and Bale, to then
Kaká,
Cruz and
yeah,
Modric. Yeah, like so, like this is a very unique situation that not only we don't have free kick specialists, but we also don't have an aerial presence. Those two things
yeah,
that are pretty fundamentally important in football.
yeah. Like those are the incremental, like those things are worth points in over the course of a season and worth goals and games, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, all right, this next stat is on progressive passes and passes into the final third. So for progressive passes, 41% of Madrid's were accurate, 66% of Barcelona's were accurate. Passes into the final third, 46% of Real Madrid's were accurate versus 75% of Barcelona's passes into the final third being accurate. They also had more progressive passes and more passes into the final third overall. So they should have a higher likelihood of those percentages being lower than us. Valverde had the most progressive passes of our midfielders.
Are these
And
all second half stats, by the way, or these
no,
are
these
over?
are whole game.
Okay.
Valverde had the most progressive passes of all our midfielders, and he only had a 40% accuracy, which was the lowest accuracy rate of all our midfielders and lowest on the team besides Mendy. At passes into the final third, Valverde was even worse at 29% accurate. So I think this kind of goes to show and talk about something we've known about the profile of midfielders in this squad. And I think it goes back to the point you're like, man, it feels like Modric has to play, even though he's 39 years old, because we're really struggling in this department. And I don't know if it is just genuinely down to a lack of quality or if we could explain it in other ways. But I think at the end of the day, like it is a step down. And I just think Valverde had a really poor game in the Clasico, a rare poor game. So maybe that's glorifying these numbers or making them worse. But even Militao, like if you look at his long range passing, like that was going to be a key component to the game. And you saw him try to hit those passes in the first half, the big diagonal. And he only hit 4 of 11 long range passes. He had a 36% pass accuracy. Like he was off too. And like that killed us. In this type of game, you needed Militao's long range passes to be on point, and you needed someone in midfield to be able to hit those vertical balls and hit them accurately.
Well, something to consider too is that a lot of the passes that we did pull off wouldn't have registered because they were offside.
So even yeah, I 100% agree on that. But I even think about the one where Mbappe, I think it was a goal. It was one of the goals and everybody knew he was offsides. It was the one where Fede like held on to it a little bit too long. He even knew when he passed it that Mbappe was going to be offsides, but he passed it anyways because he was under pressure. I think Fede, he's offsides there. Like, so I think in the past I would expect from our midfielders, like Real Madrid quality midfielders, to just turn out of that, like recycle the play, turn out, like don't force it. If it's not on, he's off. Like why play that pass? Like I think Valverde is good enough to use the outside of his foot and kind of cut back, dribble maybe in like a little circle to try and lose your man, and then switch the field of play, whatever you need to do, or just play it backwards. Like there's no point in forcing that. And I think so. I agree with your point that maybe those numbers would have been better given the offsides, but I also think we just, given the data we do have and like even just the eye test, we could have done so much more. It could be so much better this season and in that game.
I do think the most worrying thing to me in that game, beyond the tactical stuff, was that just it was such a defeatist second half. Like, look, that first half wasn't this unbelievable masterclass, but we were doing a lot of good things, and I was revisiting some of our pressing sequence. And I actually remember taking notes in that game, just revisiting my notebook. Like 8th minute, press is great. Barca force a long ball, and it goes right to Lunin. 14th, Barca give it away. We nearly score from the throw-in. 20th minute, Iñaki Peña just knocks it out of bounds because he doesn't know what else to do. Like, we had these good moments and we had these good things. All these, there was a lot of breaks that we did. We had Vinny had a clear cut onside chance, but it was really strange to me that like the second half was just such a meltdown. Like it didn't we didn't look capable of even making a pass. That 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 part of it felt very unlike Real Madrid to me. And I don't know if it was because we exerted so much energy in the first half without capitalizing, but that second half was just very, very strange.
Yeah, I think, and we always talk about like, oh, how come Barca destroy us when they start winning and we can never capitalize on that, and like vice versa when it happens. I think part of the reason why is like after that first, no, actually, having watched the second half, it was actually really surprising to me. After they go up 2-0, we had at least 3 or 4 golden
Yeah.
onside opportunities to make
The
it 2-1.
Bellingham one was crazy good.
Yeah.
Vinicius Trivela pass.
Bellingham won, and then there were two Mbappe chances that were onside. That he hit right at Iñaki. And so that was like, that kind of blurred through me. I didn't remember that. I was like, oh my God, like we could have definitely gotten back into this. And then after we didn't take those chances and they scored the third, that's when it really melted down. And I think part of it is we totally let go of any discipline and system that we had in place. Like we just gung ho for it, and we try to. And I think it gets exacerbated being at the Santiago Bernabeu because the team wants to like find a way, but instead of doing it in a kind of disciplined manner, everybody goes gung ho, everybody starts doing their own thing, and then all just spaces open up left and right. And I think we make it worse on ourselves by actually not putting together like, hey, still keep the game plan in place, still keep a disciplined system, like still wait for the counter, or still just have some, like we had Militao and Rudiger in random positions. It was all over the place. Like people were just kind of doing their own thing. And I think that's what always makes it worse when we play against Barcelona, is because we try to right the wrong, but we do it without any type of positional discipline. And then Ancelotti's subs really didn't make an impact. And and a lot of times a coach will take out a midfielder and put on a forward, or like he took out, maybe this kind of segues perfectly into the next talking point. He took out Tchouaméni and Camavinga, who, yes, they're more defensive, you could argue, but they actually gave the team more balance and won the ball back, particularly Camavinga, at insanely high rates that like you need that in order to go on and go score a goal. So Eduardo Camavinga at this left midfield position, I loved it. He had a team high of 11 recoveries and played 15 minutes less than guys like Rudiger and Militao. And center backs traditionally, like they're amongst the highest on recoveries. He had 11. And believe it or not, this is what surprised me. Most of those recoveries came in the second half, and they were in Barcelona's half. Like most of his first half recoveries were in our half. In the second half, they were in Barcelona's. So that's why it makes his substitution even more bizarre, because he had the highest 50-50 win percentage of anyone on the team, had the most ground duels, highest recoveries. Like he had an insane game, and I don't think he should have been taken out. I don't think Tchouaméni should have been taken out. I didn't think Tchouaméni was poor. And so I think those guys actually, we see so many times when managers like take out a midfielder or take out a player to put out an extra forward, and it actually works against them because you just lose all balance. And I think that happened in this game.
Let's take a quick break. I want to talk about that Tchouaméni Camavinga and the subs thing when we come back. Quick break. All right, quick break to share an important message from one of our presenting sponsors, Moji Mates. Head on over to moji-mates.com. That's MOJI-MATES.com. Moji-mates.com to see some of the coolest looking football swag you'll ever see. All those cool shirts you see the Managing Madrid podcast hosts wear on the podcast on YouTube, they're all from Moji Mates. Look at this one. This one might be my new favorite. BBC, Bale, Benzema, Cristiano, the orange shirt. Remember that year we cooked Schalke in the Champions League away from home with those orange kits? Yeah, that one. This is beautiful. That and a ton more, including all the shirts you see here. This one here, Zidane France, that's my kid's favorite. Both of them, they have this one, and they are just in Zidane fanboy phase of their life right now, which probably will never end until the day they die and they're 200 years old in their rocking chair. So many cool things here. And if you're a Managing Madrid podcast listener and you like these shirts, which is literally you listening to this, you get 15% off. So go to moji-mates.com, use code MM15OFF for 15% off. That's moji-mates.com, use code MM15OFF. Camavinga was our best player. Those numbers in the second half kind of did surprise me, but in the first half, it was like he had the Cobra slide tackle on Koundé twice on that wing. He had like no business winning the ball, and he's able to reach around and win it cleanly. Tchouameni, like, look, he's still not at his best if you ask me, but as soon as he came off, you could see that our defense and midfield fell apart. Obviously, that's also in conjunction with Camavinga coming off too. They both came off. He was cutting off passing lanes in the first half. He was intercepting, really timely interceptions, good defensive coverage. The one thing that was the weirdest thing I've seen him do in a long time, I don't think we talked about this in the post-game podcast. In the 48th minute, we have a free kick in our own box, and he decides to rush it and play a short pass to Vasquez, and we give the ball away in our own box when he had there was no reason for him to do that. It was a very boneheaded play, but ultimately, like, he gave us defensive coverage, and we took him off too. And I don't know if it's, I can't really make sense of those subs. I really can't. So I agree with you on both those guys coming off. And Camavinga is just such a problem solver and almost always performs well in Clasico. He has to be on the field.
Yeah, I think Camavinga is at the point in his career where he needs to be an out-and-out starter, and I particularly liked this left midfield position. I think if we're gonna play like a 4-4-2 or at least defensively, like Carlo always does, I think that's a great spot for him, and he'll be just as comfortable when the ball's on the weak side, on the right side of the pitch. He'll be just as comfortable tucking in and being in that central spot to cover gaps and play out from there if he ends up winning it. So I think it's, and I mentioned it on the post-game pod, it brings out the best of his abilities from that left back position, but also frees him to win the ball higher up the pitch. And what we love from him in midfield in terms of just his ball winning ability. And like you said, he did a tremendous job against Koundé. I think Koundé only beat him once. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, at this point, I know you've watched some more film too, in addition to the Clásicos, the Celta game and some other stuff. So what's been like, if you're Ancelotti, what would you do differently? I know we've talked about some of it, but anything else that's been on your mind or things that you think like your takeaways from watching these games?
Yeah. One thing is that I believe this is a salvageable situation. I believe that despite Mbappe not being integrated yet, that it'll come. Like, I'm optimistic about that. I think there has to be some kind of grace period with him being in a new league and trying to figure out the chemistry between a player who is the best player in the world, whose best position is also Mbappe's best position. That was more challenging than I thought it was going to be initially. I also think that there are players who play really well in the minutes they're given, and at the very least cause some chaos. I think Goulet needs to play more. I think it provides you with a different look. I think Camavinga needs to be entrusted more. I think we need to lessen some of the dependence of having to go to Modric every single game. And I think it would be worth putting Bellingham in a more advanced role like last season and get his confidence going offensively, because I thought that with Mbappe here, you wouldn't need Bellingham's goals, but maybe you do need it. Maybe you do. So those are just kind of some like raw scattered thoughts off the top of my head. I think this is a salvageable situation, and I don't know how Carlo will look at it, because a lot of Carlo's systems are in his minute distribution. A lot of it is actually based on trust rather than meritocracy, and so that's something that he'll have to grapple with. But we've seen also Carlo dramatically overnight just shift his tactics to something new. And also, I know you have a lot to say, but I'll also throw in a question for you, as with all the things you're about to say. But is the Ballon d'Or snub a rallying point for the team? I don't think the Clasico was a rallying point. I think that was not like one of those losses you need. But the Ballon d'Or thing, kind of like, I don't know. Maybe they come back with chips on their shoulders, especially Vinny, or maybe even Mbappe, who is not even being considered right now for the Ballon d'Or. So I'm hoping it becomes a rallying point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the combination of the Clasico plus the Ballon d'Or snub would definitely, and that's why, like, obviously it was right for the game to be postponed with everything going on in Spain.
Yeah.
But I also think to myself, like, it's kind of Mourinho's point of after we lost 5-0 at the Camp Nou when he said, I wish we were playing again tomorrow because these guys would be so hungry to, like, it kind of wears off over time. Like, just like the feeling has worn off on us a little bit since how angry, like, I was livid after the Clasico.
Right.
But, so I feel like it actually might somewhat a little bit work against us that game got canceled. But irregardless, I agree with you, though. I think that can be a point where a pivotal point where, like, the team kind of hits rock bottom. And can you then take that and use that as momentum and finally put a chip on your shoulder? Like, that's what we feel like this team has missed all season. It's having a chip on their shoulder, and get them going again. And I think you mentioned a number of different things there. And yeah, so I'm going to try and remember everything I wanted to say. One thing before we get too far off too is, like, this kind of crossed my mind, is I think Endrick would have been mouth watering playing against that Barcelona high line. Like, I think he would have done something in that.
He would like beat the offside trap and then shoot from 40 yards.
And score. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think this is salvageable. Like, I think and we've seen Carlo change. Like you said, we've seen him change almost every season. There comes like a moment where he feels like things have to make a dramatic change, and he does it. Maybe it's longer than most people. Maybe he takes longer to do it than most people agree with, but he does do it. And so I do think, like, yeah, you stop pressing, or you are very clear on what your pressing triggers are, and everybody 100% buys in on those. And then for the most part, you sit deeper. Like, I think that would make a dramatic difference in the way this team plays. And because, like, think about all the opportunities we gave up against Celta too. Like, that game we did not deserve to win. How many times could we say that all season long? And so, yeah, I do think this is salvageable. I do think, like, I do think he needs to get, in addition to, like, very clear pressing triggers and, like, the system of play, I think he needs to get the roles down. The roles are way too murky. Bellingham, like we mentioned, no clear role there. Endrick and Arda, I think they need to have bigger roles. I think, how do you define Brahim now that he's back? How do you Camavinga, his role? Like, there's still this team, there's so many question marks, and the roles aren't clear. And whenever that happens, a team just doesn't function well. So I think we have to get the roles down.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, we got to wrap it up here. If you guys like this segment, Matt and I do something similar every week over on patreon.com/managing Madrid for our members. If you're watching this on YouTube and you don't have Patreon in your country, simply hit join underneath this video or hit the memberships tab on the Managing Madrid YouTube channel, and you can access the content that way. I'm also going to be in Dallas in a couple of weeks. Hope to see Matt. We're going to see if we can throw in a meetup in Dallas with Managing Madrid fans as well. We're trying. We'll see if we can do it. We don't know if we can yet based on some logistical things, but we'll try. Matt, awesome catching up, bro. And we'll chat soon.
Yep.
Take care. Peace out.